Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of our attendees joining us today for this latest Data Science Central webinar. This is Bill Voorhees, your host. I'm the Editorial Director with Data Science Central and also Chief Data Scientist for Data Magnum. I'd like to start off our event today by thanking Alteryx for sponsoring today's event. Alteryx is a longtime supporter of the Data Science Central community, and we're honored to have them sponsoring our event today. Now, past webinars are available on demand at datasciencecentral.com. If you haven't had the opportunity to view them, I encourage you to take a look. They provide some very useful insight into a wide variety of topics of interest to our data science community. Now, today's webinar is entitled Self-Service Analytics, Fostering a Data-Enabled Culture, and that'll be presented by Alteryx. But before we begin, I'd like to briefly review the format for today's webinar. Today's event will be an hour long. We have 3 presenters who I'll introduce in just a minute. There'll be 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A following the presentation. And today's event is being recorded and will be available on datasciencecentral.com later this afternoon following today's live event. Now, I'd also like to encourage our attendees to provide questions throughout the presentation, as we'll be reviewing and presenting them on your behalf during the Q&A portion of today's event. Well, I'm very pleased to introduce today's speakers, Korri Jones with Chick-fil-A, Raman Kaler with Alteryx, and Michael Sullivan, also with Alteryx. Now, Korri is lead analyst for enterprise analytics at Chick-fil-A. And as a member of the data services team, he's responsible for supporting the greater enterprise by creating and shepherding a data and analytics culture. This involves empowering analysts across the enterprise and ensuring that as the business grows, so does the organization's capacity to meet today's and tomorrow's analytical needs. Korri holds an MBA from the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, as well as a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics from Alcorn State University. Raman is a Senior Manager of Alliance Marketing at Alteryx, where she focuses on defining strategy and executing joint marketing programs with key strategic technology partners. She currently focuses on alliance marketing efforts with Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, Salesforce, and Tableau, among others. Now, Raman has proven successful in creating strategic marketing and business development programs that support and drive pipeline growth. Michael is a solutions engineer at Alteryx. Prior to joining Alteryx, he worked in the telecom space as a Tableau consultant, where he came across Alteryx and realized the potential it could have in the industry. He's passionate about working with customers to help achieve their data-driven goals. So Korri, Raman, Michael, thanks for being with us today. We're looking forward to your presentation. Now, eat more chicken might be the customer-facing slogan, but internally, maybe Chick-fil-A's motto ought to be, consume more analytics. The popular restaurant chain is as much about or more about than just chicken sandwiches. They have fully embraced data science and analytics with the creation of the Enterprise Analytics Group. What mysteries has Chick-fil-A unlocked by creating an analytics center of excellence? Well, in today's Data Science Central webinar, you'll hear from Korri Jones as he shares how to partner strategically with both line of business and IT to develop an effective analytics ecosystem that includes Alteryx, Amazon Web Services, and Tableau, tackle critical business issues with analytics using a myriad of data, including IoT data streaming into the data lake, and foster a data-enabled culture to become a center of excellence for analysts across the organization. Today, you'll learn how a leading analytics ecosystem and strategic partnership with IT can help permeate the value of self-service analytics throughout an entire organization. So, Korri, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can begin whenever you're ready to go.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction. So as was stated earlier, we're going to talk a little bit about Chick-fil-A's analytics ecosystem, as well as the formation of our group, Enterprise Analytics. And so we're going to talk about that fostering a data-enabled culture. And if you notice, I'm using the term data-enabled and not data-driven. We'll get a little bit deeper into that, but the whole goal of it is that we want to allow data to enable the decisions that we make. We don't want the data to make the decisions because there's a certain degree of business acumen that's needed. And so let's go ahead and kick off, and we'll go a little bit into our agenda today. Introductions and background. There was one introduction earlier about myself, and I'll talk a little bit more about the background of our group and Chick-fil-A. For those of you that are not familiar with the company, they may add some really good context. Then we'll go a little bit into our enterprise analytics purpose and evolution. And it starts to dig into data science and analytics at Chick-fil-A, and then we'll kind of wrap up with some of the meat and core of our analytics ecosystem as it deals with our tooling and infrastructure. So let's go ahead and dig in. First off, Chick-fil-A. Those of you that are not familiar with the company, we were actually founded in 1946 by Esther Cathy in Hateville, Georgia. Now, the cool thing about Chick-fil-A is that we're a private family-owned business. It's ingrained in everything that we do as people. We don't just sell chicken, we're also a people business. And to give you a little bit more history, as you see there, is that the first Chick-fil-A, actual Chick-fil-A, was opened in 1967. A fascinating thing about our history is that we grew up with the mall industry, and so we were able to put a restaurant in a mall, and we were able to grow with that industry. And then as time started to shift from malls to more of like a freestanding restaurant concept, we opened our first freestanding restaurant in 1986. Again, this was also in Georgia as well. And then when you take it a step further, when you start talking about from a business standpoint, which is going to be one of the reasons why enterprise analytics was formulated, in 2006, Chick-fil-A hit $2 billion in sales. Now, that's a very big milestone right there. And an interesting thing about that, and again, if you get a chance, feel free to Google it, is that we've kind of had a certain degree of growth where we've been doubling in size every 5 years. So if you add 5 years to 2006, you're looking around 2011, we were roughly about $4 billion in sales. And then you add another 5 years to that, we were roughly about $8 billion in sales. Now, when you think about that, sales that's a massive growth. But on the flip side of that, what does that mean from our scalability from a data and analytics to be able to support that? You have restaurants in multiple states all across, and different regions, different people, different perspectives and sales and so forth. How do we make sure we're able to support our organization and the growth that we're running into? And so let's talk briefly about enterprise analytics. Who is this group? As you see on the diagram in front of you, this group or analysis and analytics at Chick-fil-A kicked off with a group called business analysis on the leftmost part of the screen. And it started off with accountants. And over time, with those accountants, they were asked to do a lot of analysis. And then as that group continued to grow, they started to hire different individuals, and we brought on more of your typical business analysts. And then for perspective, again, there's a lot of different terms for business analysts and data analysts and so forth. But for this conversation, we're going to make the assumption that a business analyst is an individual that sits heavier on the business side of things. They're not your the person that you're going to throw into a cloud environment and say, I need you to spin up EMR and Amazon and then go ahead and handle a bastion. That's a completely different skill set. These are the men and women who are in the line of business, who are supporting decision-making, and they're able to make it happen there. And so as that group was there, again, from the accountants to the business analysts, we then said, hey, we need to start to evolve how we're approaching analytics at Chick-fil-A. We need to further evolve this group. And so as you see here with the second iteration, we saw business insights. This group was kind of like a hub and spoke model in some ways, where the organization knew, hey, if I have an analysis question or a data question, I need to reach out to business insights. And so we started off with, again, some of those accountants who had kind of evolved their skill set to business analysts, and then we started to get more data analysts. We needed people who were able to set up access databases and go in and handle heavy-duty SQL queries. We had individuals who had to start thinking about some levels of data governance and how do we start to scale things up. And we brought those data analysts on board. And so for a couple of years, Business Insights was really able to do what it needed to do. But again, to echo back, our growth is so tremendous, we had to start to think about how do we make sure that we're able to do this on an enterprise scale. And therefore, about 6 months ago from today, we spun up a group called Enterprise Analytics. And if you notice here, we had data analysts, but then they completely disappear, and we see data engineers and data scientists. Externally facing, I'm a lead analyst. Internally, I'm one of our data engineers with our data services group. And so what we did with our data analysts and business analysts that were in Business Insights, we then allowed them and we sent them out to the line of business. So if you were supporting marketing, you now sit with marketing. If you were supporting supply chain, you sit with supply chain. And then we completely evolved the skill sets of the individuals that were in enterprise analytics, because we had to start to think about big data. We had to deal with, as I stated earlier, spinning up EMR clusters and doing analysis in the cloud and starting to think a lot different. And so we started off with about 9 members of enterprise analytics, and now we're about 17 strong. And so in 6 months, we've almost doubled our entire staff on a group, just to give you an idea of just how important this is to Chick-fil-A. And so sticking with the enterprise analytics analogy right here, I want to talk a little bit about what is our promise to Chick-fil-A when they spun up their group. And if you see here, you're going to see in the center of this circle is our promise. And I put EA for enterprise analytics. But you'll see these 4 buckets: self-service, data and analytics culture, empowerment, and build and deploy. All of these are kind of like they work well together. Because when you think about it, and I'll start from the top right, a data and analytics culture. When you really look at a culture of data and analytics, it's easy to go ahead and say, hey, if I give people data, they'll get the culture there. But it doesn't necessarily solve all of it. We have access to data. We're getting that access to data for different individuals across the business. But in order to do that, we also need to think about, if I give you data, how do you ask the right questions of that data? How do you make sure that we're able to support you well and you're able to run? And that goes into self-service. But then when you think about self-service, there are different tiers of that. From a raw analyst standpoint, self-service can easily be like, I have access to data, and I can use the tooling of my choice to solve the problems that I need or the questions that come from the business. But then also within that circle, you see empowerment. I look at empowerment and self-service as they work very well together, because if you are empowered, you feel that you can run with any type of analysis that your line of business is asking of. That means that you're going to feel more confident, and that degree of confidence then now proves to the business, hey, data and analytics is really important. We really appreciate the value that that's bringing. And so that's what this circle kind of does. And these are 4 big buckets that enterprise analytics we work with. And then that last one there is build and deploy. As we said earlier, you have business analysts and data analysts, which again, I defined earlier, is that do I really want a business analyst to say I need you to do a partially observable Markov chain, for those of my statistics friends on the line, and build this out? I need a model that handles certain scenarios. The thing is, that's really not ideal. So what we've decided to do, we feel like is really important, is with our data scientists and data engineers to go ahead and build these models and deploy those out into the business. And we're going to be able to walk alongside these line of business analysts. And so that's really, really critical to what we do and why we do what we do, because otherwise it's not scalable and it doesn't do anything for the business. And so this is enterprise analytics promise to the greater Chick-fil-A business. And so as we start talking more about analytics, here's a Venn diagram that shares a little bit about our perspective about this. When you look at it, there are 3 big buckets: statistics, you have IT or information technology, and then you have business acumen. In many cases, individuals will sit either very heavily in one, or they may sit in 2 different buckets. It's very rare to have somebody that sits in all 3. But then when you think about it, I have somebody that is really great with statistics and then understands the business. They're able to ask the right questions and have the content and context. You're really going to be very valuable. But in many cases, you run into individuals that have a heavy degree of statistics and a heavy degree of information technology background. You start talking about infrastructure and the technology side of things, but not as much with the business acumen. And so there's different combinations for this. But for our group, one of the things that we really sit very heavily on is we try to find individuals that can sit in all 3 of those buckets. Maybe you're not going to be an expert in statistics and IT and business acumen, but just enough so that you're able to be, as we call, dangerous when it comes to data science and analytics. And just for a moment, I want to really hone in on this IT side of things. When you start to look at data science and analytics, it's really starting to blend the lines between what was typically analysis back in the day and what is currently, or what was, IT. And so there's this overlap that really needs to be accepted and appreciated, and it becomes a really good opportunity for both sides of the spectrum when we start talking about your analysts and your IT to really work together, because the techniques are really starting to blend, and they're becoming very important for those two sides to work well together. And so talking about that IT bucket, which is green, let's take just a moment to look at a quote from Sun Tzu, and I think this really sums it up well, when it says that strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory, but tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. And so we internalize this, because when you look at it, and I put some definitions for strategy and tactics here, strategy is like our path going forward from today to our goal. And so when you think about it, under that definition, it's this is our organization, this is what we want to do. So you know your why, you know what you want to do, but then there's still that how. How do I achieve what I set out to do? And that goes into the tactics. How you actually achieve your goal. So when you think about this, a lot of our group, when we spun up, we had this really great strategy. We can talk about statistics, we can talk about the business, but that information technology piece, we don't really know that intimately. Because there's security, there's so many other things that are involved when you start talking about IT. They understand the tactics. They know how to get the job done. But then also, as I said earlier, is that there's this blend between both of the groups. Again, analytics, or your analyst group, and your IT, is that they've been doing a lot of this stuff. They've been building models in some cases, and they understand about deploying those, making sure that you have code reviews, start thinking about succession strategy with some of the things that are being built, which is really, really important. And so we kind of really look at this. IT is a partner. We're in this together, and we want to do the exact same things, which is empower and support our business, which is Chick-fil-A. And so we've really been very intentional about our relationship with IT. And so that's one line of the relationship. But then there's the other side of that, our line of business analysts. These are the men and women who are in the line of business, and they're really supporting a lot of phenomenal work out there. They get questions all the time. And then there are some things that may be outside of their skill set, but they're still willing to learn. And so what we've done internally for our data culture is that we created a group called COPA, a community of practicing analysts. And this is about 100+ analysts across the line of business that get together, and they work together, and then we help with training, facilitating training. Like right now, the big buzzword is machine learning and artificial intelligence. So how can we take our data engineers and data scientists and help train internally the men and women who are in the line of business that want to really dig deep into that and leverage our internal tools as well as the data that we have, because every data has a different story. So we not only do training, we also talk about some of the best practices. For instance, when you're doing a query in a cloud, in our case, we have AWS environment, and we're leveraging Amazon Athena for it. There are certain best practices, as well as when you start to deal with Redshift or other types of technology. Some are transactional, some are not. Set a live Tableau connection to a Redshift cluster that may not, it may not be the best thing if you're getting 100 pings an hour where that query continues to hit off. That may not be ideal. And so how can we make sure that we're able to partner well and empower our analysts in the line of business? And then you start talking about access to tooling and data. I've brought a couple of those. Tableau, Alteryx is a key tool of ours as well, and then that Amazon stack. So how do we make sure that we're able to empower our analysts in the line of business, but also not to stand in the way of them achieving that self-service? And so in line with that self-service idea is that there are two big buckets that sit on my team. One is data governance, and the other is technology governance. Data governance, for some people, some analysts, that's a bad word, because you start thinking about restriction to data and then a whole bunch of other things, and sometimes bureaucracy. At Chick-fil-A, that's not how we look at that. We start to think about scalability as well as cleanliness of data. I would prefer not to send raw data to my vice president. there might not be too much analysis that would happen in that case. Let's go ahead and clean that data up and make sure that there's a defined process for handling that at scale at a company that is growing at the rate that we are. And so data governance is a very big bucket of the work that we're doing. And then technology governance. I actually sit with this group and we start talking about tooling. How do we use the best tool set or database, whether it's going to be on-prem or cloud? In what cases and what and when should you use those things? And so we kind of started to define those very well for our line of business analysts so that they have a roadmap because ultimately that helps the business and it helps them. And a little more about our analytics ecosystem. You'll see on the right some pretty cool graphics right there. But for us, we have a data lake. It is going to be the foundation for our data at Chick-fil-A. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to get rid of Oracle. We have Oracle. We have a Redshift. And so for us, when we thought about our data lake, when we first spun this up, was that in many cases you hear about data engineers and data scientists. That's what a data lake is for. But for us, we said, no, that's not really going to be ideal. We need to be able to support our line of business analysts, and they should be able to have that self-service. And not just our analysts, our business users. If you feel really good with your Tableau skill set or you want to pull some data out and work in Excel, we want to make sure that there is that level of access. And then it goes into making sure that we have that data governance, as I said earlier. And then this SAVE model, this is a personal acronym that I use internally. When we start talking about our data, specifically in our data lake, is we think about for SAVE, S is going to be for security. You got to make sure the right people have access to the right data and that certain data is locked down. And then you have accessibility because we need to make sure people have access to their data. If it's your data and you don't have access to it, there's a problem. Visibility, who owns it? Where did this data come from? What is the lineage? All of those types of things. And then the last letter is E for empowerment. And as you keep hearing me say empowerment, 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 we want to make sure that everybody is able to really realize that self-service atmosphere. And so then for us and my team, specifically with the data engineering group, we're very, very heavily, we use Alteryx. Alteryx is a phenomenal tool. I call it our curation and wrangling tool. We get a chance to really do some great stuff for our analysts and our enterprise as well. And then our tool for storytelling is Tableau. I like the term storytelling as opposed to visualization, but that's just personally. But when you look at it, Tableau does a great job with painting a picture of what really does this data tell? What is the story behind this data? And so for some of you all that are a little bit more interested in some of our architecture with how we've kind of set things up for our data lake ecosystem, as well as how all this kind of plays a role with our data governance and technology governance models, is going to be right here. As you see on the top, I have a portal. That's really where everybody's going to get access to the data that they have. So we've actually built this in-house. We built a lot of this ourselves using the AWS stack very heavily. And so our portal is where you go in and it's kind of a dual-pronged attack. It's a catalog as well as it's a way for you to request access to data you don't have access to. I mean, imagine having to send an email to multiple people to try to get access to a data set. You don't need to do that anymore. You click a button, you request access, it goes to the right people, and then they grant you that access. And then we have like an internal intake engine, because when you start thinking about big data and working within the cloud, we take our data and then we convert that to Parquet, and our intake engine grabs data from different formats and different ways, and then it puts that in our storage. Our metadata, as you see, for the cataloging, and we have our harvester, which is for reconciliation. So it reaches out into our different environments. It takes a look at what's there, what's not there, and make sure that that catalog is truly updated. And so, again, our storage is based off of is Amazon, and so it's going to be S3. And then when you look on the left of this, you see our analytics and visualization platforms. So we have a couple. We have groups that use Power BI. We have some groups that use Tableau. Tableau is more utilized across the enterprise. My group, data engineering group, we specifically use Alteryx as well. And then how those tools kind of connect to your compute and query. So for those of you that, again, that are not very familiar with the data lake, a good way to kind of think about that is that it's a strategic way to separate compute from storage. That's a completely different topic altogether, but just to kind of put that perspective there. And that's why you see storage on one line and then compute on another. And so let's do really quickly about this data analysis pipeline. How does this stuff all work? How do we kind of think about it? And so for us, we take a look at, we put our source data into that intake mechanism that I stated earlier, and it gets stored. But then there's that sweet spot in the middle when you have data in a store, whether it's a database or whether it's in the cloud, and then you need to do something to that data. I need to curate it. I need to clean it. I need to do a lot of complex joins or whatever the case may be, and then you process that as you see with that cycle, and then when I process it, I restore it. And now maybe I don't need to process it again after that, or maybe that's a data set that could be utilized down the line for consumption. But we kind of look at it in this way because there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen to data. You do some web scraping, odds are you're going to have to do something to kind of clean that up. And so for us, Alteryx really sits well right there in that bucket. We're able to spin things up very quickly. We're able to go ahead and analyze and go through and clean and curate, and we can blend multiple data sets. And when I say blend multiple, I have some processes that I'm working with about 30 to 40 different data sets in different places across the enterprise, and I'm doing a lot of work to it. And so Alteryx gives us a really good mechanism to do that. And then when you look on the right side of this, that consumption side, that insight or the answers, and that's really where Tableau sits very well. And again, this is from an enterprise standpoint. This is like our typical process, is that now it's time for consumption. I can consume via Tableau. I can consume via Excel. I can consume via any mechanism that I may need. Or in the cases where I've worked with that process and analyzed, and maybe I just need a subset that comes from that process, and I'm done. So there's a lot of different ways to look at this. And so we're not specifically going to go into like ad hoc analysis, but we have something for that as well. I like ad hoc analysis and digging into data. And again, having the right tools to support that really goes a long way. And so I want to talk a bit about Alteryx. You've heard me say it a couple of times and really want to bring it to front. Alteryx is for our data wrangling. When I have some data that really needs to be wrangled and tackled, I go to Alteryx. It helps us with automation because we can schedule different processes and workflows, as well as from an efficiency standpoint. I can do a lot of stuff in a short period of time and really start to save time. I have an internal group here that was spending about 4 hours a day on a particular set of processes that now they knock that down to 10 minutes. And so something that was taking half a person's day now takes 10 minutes. And this was done by our analysts to really execute on that. That's really powerful. And it's flexible connection to a lot of data. We start talking about that. I can actually output data into Tableau directly into the server. I can do stuff with Power BI. I can reach into my Oracle, my Redshift, all types of different scenarios. And then I put responsive customer support. They're actually more of a partner. I reach out and I ask a question, and it's like, hey, Korri, what can we do? How can we help you out? I had the privilege and the honor to go work out of their office in California recently, and that was really such a pleasure to get an opportunity to do that. And they were like, hey, what can we do? You have any cool ideas about what we can improve upon? I mean, really and truly a partner. And I'll briefly hit the Alteryx gallery. This is pretty much a mechanism where we can share our workflow. So I can build a complex workflow and then share that with the enterprise where somebody else can download it and utilize it in whatever way they would like. And so we have an internal gallery. There's a larger, like, global Alteryx gallery for those of you that are customers, or if not, take a look at it. There's some really cool stuff out there, as well as it gives us the ability to deploy stuff. And so when you start talking about from an IT standpoint and an analyst, sometimes there may be something really, really simple that I want to put out there, and it's just going to take a really simple application. Guess what? I can do that via Alteryx. I can spin that up, I can put it in a gallery, and I can now distribute it to a subset of individuals to give me feedback on data or to do whatever we need to do. And so it really you start talking about self-service. Alteryx does a very good job with allowing us to do that. And so I know I've talked a lot about a lot of different things. So what's next for us? What we're going to be doing is we're going to be going to a multi-cloud environment. We have AWS set up. We'll be moving into Google Cloud platform as well within the coming months, as well as we're going to be spinning up an Analytics Academy. We start talking about that empowerment and training. I mean, we have analysts across the business who really want to up their data wrangling skill set, who really want to dig into things. And so we'll be doing a bit of that. And then we also have joint planning with our IT group. which is a specific one, which is our data and analytics group, and we're going to have innovation hackathons specifically for data science and analytics. But then most of all, learning, having fun, and growing together. So those are some of the things, a little bit about Chick-fil-A, and I believe now you're going to get a really good opportunity to learn more about Alteryx.
Awesome. Korri, thank you for that fantastic presentation. Before we jump to our demo of AWS, Alteryx, and Tableau in action together, I quickly want to speak to what makes Alteryx a leading enterprise analytics platform today. Through the end-to-end Alteryx platform, users can discover, blend, prep, analyze, deploy, and manage the analytics within an organization. As Korri shared in his presentation, Alteryx enables organizations like Chick-fil-A to perform advanced blending across multiple large and varied sources of data, whether they be in the cloud, i.e. AWS, or on-premises. Similarly, with Alteryx, you can output your insights in any format, including Tableau. It's important to note that Alteryx also provides many features beyond data prep and blend, including the ability to perform analytics, spatial analysis, advanced predictive modeling, all in a code-free and code-friendly environment. And that's all through just one of our offerings, Alteryx Designer. When you add in Alteryx Server and Connect, you gain the ability to discover data and analytic assets across your organization, develop analytic processes, and share that analysis with others at scale. What's more, with our latest product offering, Alteryx Promote, you get to round out the platform, or you get to round out your organization's analytics by providing an end-to-end data science system for developing, deploying, and managing predictive models and real-time decision APIs. Adding to the value of the Alteryx platform is our community, which is there every step of the way to provide guidance and support when needed to help ultimately foster and further your culture of analytics. So how does Alteryx differ from other providers of analytics? Well, that's easy. Our platform is purpose-built to create new data partnerships by breaking barriers between IT, analytic teams, and the line of business, and shortening the distance between the business problem to the business solution. We empower every analyst and data scientist to solve even the most overwhelming analytic business problem with less time and effort and drive business-changing outcomes across the organization. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Michael for a demo of the tech stack that was discussed today. Michael?
All righty, thank you so much. Just give me 1 second to go ahead and pull up my screen and we can get started. So as Raman mentioned, we have a suite of products in our platform, but for the focus on the demonstration today, what I would like to do is go ahead and jump into the Alteryx Designer. Now the Alteryx Designer is going to be your desktop software. It's going to sit on your laptop behind your firewall. It's going to be a drag and drop user interface. So if you want to go ahead and bring in your data, what you're going to do is go ahead and drag and drop this input data tool up here on the top onto what we call our canvas area. With that, you would navigate to the left here where it says connect to a file or a database. Go ahead and select this dropdown. And what you're going to notice is that we can bring in data that resides in SQL Server. You can bring in data from Oracle, Hadoop, essentially anything ODBC or OLEDB driven, and we can pull in your data from. So if you wanted to go ahead and establish that Redshift connection, that would be through this ODBC drive here. You can note also that you can bring in your data in the form of a flat file, and I would just navigate to that file pane here. We could take a quick look at all the different file types that Alteryx supports. So you can go ahead and read in your data that's in the form of a text file, a CSV, Microsoft Excel, JSON, Esri, Microsoft Access, right? And this is just a quick glimpse of all of those different file types that we do support. As alluded to earlier, you can also bring in your data that resides in the cloud. You can pull in your data from S3, and that would be if you navigated to our connectors pane to the far right over here. You notice that we have API connections to various applications, so things like Salesforce, Marketo, and this is where you would find that connection to S3 as well. Once you go ahead and point to your initial data source, that's when you look to the top here in your tool palette in order to start to do some manipulation on your data set. So under your favorites category, more of our most commonly utilized tools, things like your input and output data. In the same way that we read in data, you can output it. So you can output your data back into the cloud, back into a database, back into a flat file, or you can push your data out into a visualization software like Tableau, Qlik, or Power BI. Under the favorites category, you're going to see some other commonly utilized tools, things like your data cleansing, filters, formula tool, and then of course we have this join tool, which is going to allow you to pull in your data coming in from disparate sources. What you're going to notice up at the top here in the tool palette is that all of these tools are broken out and color-coded based on functionality. So in this preparation category here, this is where you would spend some time if you need to do any sort of data cleansing, data shaping, data manipulation. So you'll see some of those commonly utilized tools in the favorites category, as well as others such as sample tool, select, and then the sort and unique tools as well. Under the join category here, you're going to notice that we have that join tool, and then we also support fuzzy matching. Under our parse category, notice that we can run a text to columns, you can do an XML parse, or you can incorporate regular expression as well. The transformation category is great for running things like crosstabs or transposes. A crosstab, of course, being where you're taking your data that's in a vertical alignment and then transitioning that horizontally, and vice versa with the transpose. And then the summarize tool is going to sort of act as a pivot table where you can do your aggregations, groupings, summarizing, things like that. As you start to move further along in the tool palette here, the tools are going to start to get a little bit more advanced, a little bit more sophisticated. So you jump into your more advanced spatial analytics. Within the spatial analytics, you can do things such as plotting points on a map, leveraging this create points tool. And then you could find the distance between 2 points, perhaps find the trade area around a point, heat grids, things like that. And then we jump into our more advanced predictive analytics. That's going to start with data investigation and range all the way to prescriptive. So we have 6 different tabs here for our predictive tools. Under the data investigation, you're going to notice that we can do things like association analysis, Pearson correlation. Under our predictive tab here, you notice that we have some decision trees, forest models, linear regression, logistic regression. We have some A/B testing, time series forecasting. You can do predictive grouping, things like market basket analysis. And then we also have our prescriptive simulation as well. So what I'd like to go ahead and do now is just build out a simple workflow for you guys and kind of give you a feel for how that would look. So if I wanted to go ahead and reach out to my S3 data source, what I would do again is navigate to this connectors tab and drag and drop this Amazon S3 download tool onto our canvas area. With that, I would go ahead and input my credentials here. So I'd input my access key. Let me go ahead and grab my secret key. And then with that, you would point to the bucket name that you want to go ahead and pull from. So I went ahead and created a Chick-fil-A bucket here, which I can go ahead and double click on. And with that, it's going to give me access to my object name as well. With that, I'm going to go ahead and bring a browse tool onto the canvas area. The browse tool is going to allow me to take a deeper dive, deeper analysis into my data set. And what I would do next is go ahead and hit this green play button at the top of the screen. Alteryx is a runtime environment, meaning that when you go ahead and hit this green play button, Alteryx will reach out to your data source, extract that data, and load it into the computer's working memory. So with that in mind, there's not going to be any record limitation in terms of how much data you're able to read into Alteryx. The only limitation is going to fall on your end in terms of how much RAM is available on your PC. With this browse tool, you're going to notice that we get a visual representation of our data set to the left here, as well as a broken down data profile. So you're going to see values like the uniques, nulls, min, max, average, standard deviation. Further, we have built-in functionality for data integrity. If you notice in this results pane below, we have green bars at the top of each column that are reading OK 100%. Essentially, Alteryx is reading each individual column and detecting the integrity of that column. If you notice under this discount column, there's a little bit of red in that bar. So when I hover over that discount column, it's telling me that almost 9% of my values are null, and I can see that in my data set below, right? So we can see all those null values. When I go ahead and click into this column, again, you get that visual representation to the left here. You see perhaps some outliers within your data set, and then you get that data profile where it's going to tell me that, okay, 704 of my values are null. So maybe I wanted to go ahead and clean up those null values a bit. What I would do is navigate to this preparation category, and there's a couple different ways that you could go about cleaning that data. You could use the filter tool. You could create some sort of formula. You can impute that data. I'm going to go ahead and use this data cleansing tool here. So what I would do, again, drag and drop that data cleansing tool onto our canvas. I'm going to go ahead, navigate to the left here in the configuration pane, select the field that I'd like to clean up. So in this case, it's going to be that discount column. And I'm going to choose to replace those nulls with a 0. Notice you could also remove unwanted characters, things such as leading and trailing white space, unnecessary letters, numbers, or punctuation. You would just make those selections accordingly here. Go ahead, hit that play button. And what you're going to notice is out of this output anchor here, all of those null values have now been replaced by a 0, and that discount column is going to be 100% clean. So perhaps I wanted to go ahead next and run some expressions on this data set. Maybe I wanted to incorporate some sort of formulas. What I would do is drag and drop this formula tool onto our canvas area. The formula tool is going to allow me to update existing columns or create a new column. So if I wanted to create a new column, for instance, I would navigate to the left here, select Add Column, perhaps name it Total Sales, and then build out a simple expression. So I could type in my column headers of unit price, multiplied by quantity, multiplied by the discount. With that, I get an error in my data preview here. It's saying unmatched parenthesis. Essentially, it's just looking for me to finalize that expression. And when I do so, I get a preview of my data set in this pane here. And because this is the numeric value, I'm going to go ahead and update the data type from a string to a double. Now when I go ahead, run that workflow, and look at my output anchor here, you're going to see that we have a new column for total sales. If I wanted to take this one step further, I can add in another formula. Notice that order of operations does matter here, where I'm actually going to leverage this total sales column that we just calculated in my next expression moving forward. So I'll create a new column, name it sales bin. I could navigate to this little f of x functions pane to the left here, pop that open. That's going to give me a list of all of the different expressions that I could leverage within Alteryx. I'm going to use a conditional if-then template here, where we're going to say if the total sales that we just calculated above are greater than 1,000, then I want to put that in a bin called high. Otherwise, let's put that record in a bin called low. With that, again, you're going to see our two new columns. One's going to be for total sales, and then we're also going to have the sales bin in which those sales reside in. Next, maybe we want to go ahead and do some aggregation of our data, start to summarize it a bit, do some groupings. So what I would do is navigate to this transformation category above, and I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop a summarize tool onto the canvas. Now, I really like to show the summarize tool because it does a great job of visually representing how your data is changed throughout this process. So this is what my data looks like coming into the tool, right? I selected this input anchor here. Now I'm going to navigate to the left in the configuration pane. I'll start to do that grouping. So I can go ahead and group by customer ID. Maybe I want to do a count distinct of my order ID to get a total number of transactions. Let's sum up our total sales. We could rename this column to total sales. And then I'm going to go ahead and bring in our store number as well. So with that, again, hit that play button. And what you're going to see is that visual transformation take place. So once more, this is my input anchor. This is what my data look like coming into this tool. When I select the output anchor, you can visually see that transformation take place. And the neat thing about Alteryx is that you can always trace your data back to see how your data had been transformed throughout the process. So with that in mind, we like to say that Alteryx is in a black box. So we went ahead and pulled our data coming out of S3. We did some data cleansing, ran some expressions on that data, and then did some aggregations and grouping. Perhaps next we wanted to go ahead and combine this order information that I have here that resides in S3 and combine that with some customer data. So let's say that the customer data resides in a Redshift database. What I can do is drag and drop this input data tool onto our canvas area. And I'm going to navigate to my saved data connections now, where I have a Redshift connection. Go ahead and pop that open. And what you're going to see to the left here is a list of all of the tables within my Redshift database. I'm interested in bringing in my customer data, so I would just go ahead and double-click on customer data. If I wanted to go ahead and select a few columns here, I could pop open the SQL editor. And what you're going to notice is that Alteryx has automatically configured a query based on my selection in this visual query builder here. So this is where Alteryx tries to bridge the gap between someone who has more of that technical skill set versus someone who doesn't have that same background, right? So if you have any custom SQL coding that you wanted to go ahead and incorporate into the SQL editor, you could go ahead and do so. If you've never utilized SQL before, you can just use this visual query builder here, select OK. And then I'm going to go ahead and bring in a select tool next. So what the select tool is going to allow us to do is reorder our columns by selecting these up and down arrow keys to the left here. So if I wanted to place customer ID second in the mix here, I just select these up and down arrow keys to place customer ID second. So no more having to copy and paste within Excel, moving those columns around. No more going into your select statements and trying to, go through that entire mix and copying and pasting within that select statement to move around those columns. I could rename that field here, underscore ID, and then I could also change my data type as well. So this data is being read in as a string. I could change it to an integer or a double, however I might see fit. With that, you're going to go ahead and see those changes take effect out of that output anchor from the select tool. You're going to notice that customer ID is second, right? It's been renamed. And then if we go ahead and take a look at the metadata, you're also going to notice that we changed customer ID from that string field to a double. Now perhaps we can go ahead and join these two data sources together. So I'd look to the join category up at the top on our tool palette here, drag and drop this join tool, and connect each data set like so. So this is going to represent my left-hand data set. This will represent my right-hand data set. We select the unique identifier in order to join the two together on, which is going to be customer ID. Go ahead and hit that green play button. And what you're going to notice out of this join tool are three output anchors, an L, a J, and an R, where the L represents my left unjoined data, the R will represent the right unjoined data, and then the J is going to be my inner join, where these two data sets were able to meet based off of that customer ID. If I wanted to go ahead and take it one step further, I could bring in a union tool, connect the R and the J, and that would be representative of a right outer join. Connect the L, the J, and the R, and that would represent a full outer join. So now that we got our data in a nice clean format that we're ready to move forward with, perhaps we can go ahead and do some advanced analytics on it. So what I'm going to go ahead and do next is navigate to this predictive category, and notice in our data set below that we have a responder field. So perhaps we want to go ahead and predict the likelihood that a customer will or will not respond to an email marketing campaign. That's going to be a binary yes-no variable. So what we can incorporate is a logistic regression into our model here. So I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop that logistic regression tool, navigate to the left here where we're going to name our model. I go ahead and select the target variable, which is going to be that responder field. And then you select your predictor variables, or those variables that you want to predict are likely to have an impact on this responder field. So let's say total number of transactions and total sales. I can right-click here, add all my browse tools, and then go ahead and execute this workflow. What you're going to notice out of this logistic regression is an O, R, and I output, where the O is going to represent your model object, the R is going to give you a results pane, and then the I is going to be more of an interactive viz. So out of this R results pane, I can go ahead and pop that open. And this is going to allow your analysts to kind of go in and get a better feel, make more well-informed decisions. Oops, let me go ahead and pull that open. Right, so we're going to look at P and Z values. You're going to look at significance codes, right? So someone like myself who doesn't really necessarily have that stats background, I could just leverage these significance codes, look up here, and see which variable has a higher impact on whether or not that customer is likely to respond, which it looks like is going to be total sales. If we look into that interactive viz, go ahead and open that. What you're going to notice in the interactive viz is some information like accuracy, recall, optimal probability cutoff. We have some conditional density plots. This is what makes it more of an interactive viz. And then some performance, ROC, precision versus recall charts as well. What I want to draw our attention to in this case is the optimal probability cutoff of 0.117 because we can leverage this after we score our model. So let's go ahead next and score our model. I'm going to filter on only those customers where the responder field was equal to no. So we'll bring in a filter tool, filter based on responder equal to no, and then I'm going to bring in a score tool as well, and we're going to go ahead and score our model now. So what the score is going to produce is two new columns, score yes and score no, where score yes is going to indicate yes, the likelihood that a customer will respond to my email marketing campaign, and score no is going to indicate no, the likelihood that a customer will not respond. So out of this output anchor, it will give us two columns for that score yes and score no. And then as I mentioned earlier, we can leverage that 0.117 coming out of that interactive viz, and we could go ahead next and filter on only those score yeses that were greater than or equal to 0.117 because that's going to indicate those customers who have the highest likelihood of responding to my email marketing campaign. So now when I go ahead and bring in that filter tool, we'll say X yes greater than or equal to 0.117. And perhaps we wanted to go ahead next and output that data set into Tableau. What I would do is navigate to this in and out category, drag and drop an output data tool onto our canvas, and we can push this data out to a TDE. I'll just call this workflow. And when we go ahead and execute this workflow now, what we're going to notice is that there's going to be a hyperlink in our results pane below for that TDE file. Just give it a second to run through here. You can see our TDE that was written right now. I can go ahead and pop that open. And what we're going to see here is that our data is populated directly into Tableau. So keep in mind, you can also output this data up into a Tableau server, or you could push it to any other visualization software like Qlik or Power BI. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand the ball back to Raman.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to extend a big thank you to you, Michael, for that demo, as well as Korri for our presentation earlier today. As a next step, please visit us at Alteryx.com/Tableau Kit to download your 14-day free trial of the Alteryx Designer. With the kit, you'll get pre-built Alteryx workflows, making it that much easier to get hands-on experience with the platform. A follow-up email containing the URL will be sent to all webinar attendees as a follow-up. And with that, I'd like to say thank you once again, and I'll hand it back to you, Bill.
Well, Raman, Korri, Michael, thank you for that excellent presentation. And we'll get started with today's Q&A session. I want to thank the audience for their participation. We've had a lot of questions that have come in. So we'll do our best to get through some of them in the time remaining. And during this Q&A, I'll leave up this screen with contact information for Korri, Raman, and Michael in case you'd like to contact them following today's event. So let's get started. Korri, you had a really unique experience in being able to establish this enterprise analytics group. You were probably taking stuff away from some folks and giving it to others. And so tell us a little bit about how you went about getting sign-off from IT and line of business and the sort of pushback and wins that you were able to negotiate.
All right. So thanks. That's a lot of questions wrapped up in one. So definitely getting the buy-in from the different groups was really, I'm going to say for us, culture. Culture really meant a lot and made a big difference because we all see that we're part of the same team, which is Team Chick-fil-A. It's not Team IT, Team Enterprise Analytics, or Team whatever the other one may be. And so we first had that vision in mind. But when we started to spin things up, there were questions such as, how do you start productionizing certain things? There's going to be an enterprise analytics group. You have different data engineers. You have different people who are spinning up things. And then there's the issue that comes up with any piece of technology. For those of us that have been practitioners in the space, I would really like to see somebody run a petabyte of data in an Oracle database that hasn't been configured to handle that, and then try to spin it up and expect other people to be able to do work at the same time, or opening up multiple threads. And we start doing like simulation modeling and so forth. And so we really had to have those conversations to make sure that we were all on the same page and that we knew each other's strengths. And so when I said in an earlier one of my slides is that we have joint meetings together with our IT partners, and we make sure that we're working together, because there are things that they are great at that we'll probably never be great at. But it's also about leveraging each other's strengths and weaknesses and coming together and making sure that you are all on the same team and that we're willing to learn. So that was really the big thing that we had to kind of unwrap and make sure that we were together. Now, when we start talking about some areas of pushback, I'd say probably one of the bigger areas of pushback was how we were going to leverage some of the tools in an environment, because a lot of stuff we had traditionally been done was done in an on-prem environment. And as I said earlier, my advanced analytics team, one of our use cases right now is actually building a bot that predicts the number of fries that people need to, that our restaurants need to kind of cook at a certain period of time during micro forecasting. So there's some really cool stuff right there. But when you start thinking about the amount of data you're going to need, the calculation, the processing, and what that's going to put on a system, we had to make sure, or they asked of us, or IT asked of us and said, hey, guys, we need to make sure that you're not going to bring this whole system down. Let's work together. And so we've really, really and truly have been blessed to have a good culture and a good group that everybody believes. We are Team Chick-fil-A. I think that answered all of the questions. If I miss one, you can ping me back on that.
Well, Korri, thanks. That was great. And by the way, the audience is interested. Where does enterprise analytics report into the organization? Apparently not to IT.
Yes, we don't. So that's another pretty cool thing. When you looked at that previous chart when I showed business analysis and business insights, we actually sat within our financial services group. And what we started to think about was that it made more sense for our analytics group to sit outside of other departments, to spin up a brand new department specifically for this type of work. But it's interesting, we're enterprise analytics, and then we're also paired with our enterprise risk group. And so that is our new department. So we don't sit on IT or financial services. The business said, let's make something new because this is going to be very important work. And it wanted to make sure that we were unbiased in some ways, because in financial services, I may be more biased to financial services work or supply chain or IT. And so it gives us that ability to be kind of like an outsider looking in, but we're still an insider, if that makes sense.
Well, Korri, thank you. And here's a question from the audience for Michael, and we just have like a very short period of time left. Michael, the audience wants to know the predictive analytics that you showed, are those R-based packages? And specifically with respect to both predictive analytics and the transforms, can I bring in my own code out external to what you've got in the system?
I can answer part of that, and I'll ping Michael for the other piece of that. You can leverage R within the Alteryx tool. I actually use it quite a bit. My school kind of drilled that into us, and I'm so grateful for it. And so you can leverage that. There are a couple of other things you can bring into it. Specifically, when you start getting to, I think I saw something, I know some people ask about Java and C# and Python and other things. There are mechanisms within Alteryx that allow you to kick off external processes and then bring that data back into the flow in and of itself, which I think gives a lot of flexibility. And so if I missed anything particular, I think I'll ping Michael if there's anything you think might be additional to add to that.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add to that is, yes, those tools are built off of open source R coding. And to point that out, if you guys do get your hands on an Alteryx Designer, if you drag and drop one of those predictive tools onto the canvas area, for instance, the score tool, you could go ahead and right-click on that tool, select Open Macro, and that's going to kind of show you a look under the hood as to how that tool was built and also the underlying R coding that goes on in the background.
Oh, very cool. Okay, so Korri, Raman, Michael, thank you so much. Great answers to some very good questions. And for those of you that asked questions today that weren't answered, we'll be sending all the unanswered questions to Korri, Raman, Michael, and the Alteryx team so they can follow up with you after today's webinar. Now, I have just a few quick announcements. If you'd please mark your calendars for May 8th, that's our next DSC webinar, which will be People Analytics, Airbnb experimenting on recruiting efficiency, and that'll be sponsored by Tableau. Also remember that today's taping will be available for on-demand viewing. You can see that later today on the home page of Data Science Central in the Webinar tab located at the top of the page. Well, this brings today's webinar to a close. I'd like to thank our audience for their attendance and thoughtful questions. A special thanks again to Alteryx for their sponsorship, and particularly to our speakers, Korri Jones, Raman Kaler, and Michael Sullivan, for their insight into today's topic. So this is Bill Voorhees. I'm very pleased to have been your host for today's event. I look forward to seeing you all again on May 8th. Have a great day.